everyone, welcome to another episode of Classic Gaming Brothers. I'm Seth.
And I'm Zach.
And we are the Classic Gaming Brothers.
Yep, that is correct.
Wow, you yepped it very, pretty, like, I don't know, you just seemed not in it today.
Well, for those listening at home, I did take the day off sick, so I am, if my voice sounds a little off, that is why. Hopefully I won't cough too much.
Yeah, well, if he will try to edit those out anyway. So
we'll try.
Well, so if you've been home at sick all day, what have you been playing recently, Zach?
Yes, well, I've been playing recently Warcraft 3, or as we refer to it on our show, Warcraft III, Reforged, which is a recent release from Blizzard. They are doing it's an HD remaster of Warcraft 3 Reign of Chaos and its expansion pack Frozen Throne. It actually came out the end of last month, January 28th, 2020. I picked it up. It has so far not great reviews. It's currently averaging it's currently averaging at a 60 of 100 on Metacritic. It suffered from a lot of issues early on in its release, including user interface being messed up. The graphical stuff that they promised to improve looks worse than it did when it came out in the early 2000s. And there's a couple of game-breaking bugs that apparently existed in the game that I hadn't got to yet. I'm replaying the campaign, so I haven't had any major issues with it yet. I've just been kind of enjoying the Warcraftness of it.
The Warcraftiness.
The Warcraftiness of it. Yeah, so far I like it. I can definitely see where people have some complaints, though. A lot of the upscale or HD remastering they did for like the cutscenes and stuff doesn't look actually that good. So,
that's not. Yeah, it's Blizzard is having a rough go lately with this Warcraft remaster, and there was something. Oh, there wasn't some controversy around Overwatch too.
Yeah, there was some controversy.
I meant Overwatch, the number 2, and also Overwatch 2.0. So
yes. There was kind of controversy with Overwatch, the number 2, and Overwatch as well.
So that's well,
they've been trying. Hopefully they will start to put out some patches and stuff for this game and update it. I know last time I logged into it, there was a 2 gigabyte patch that was available for it, so
I don't think the original Warcraft 3 was 2 gigabytes.
No, I don't think it was either.
And isn't it restricting you from playing with playing the original game? It's keeping you from playing the original game.
I haven't encountered that. I've been able to play through the campaign fine.
What about custom maps and stuff? You don't do that?
Custom maps and stuff, there's some weird stuff going on with that now. Mm-hmm. For one thing, Blizzard is basically saying if you make a custom map, it's theirs.
Yes.
So
like Bethesda.
So people are very happy about that. Another issue that at least I haven't been able to figure out how to do like a custom map with AI that's not online. So that's been a weird little thing that's one of the reasons I've been playing the campaign is I don't play a lot of online Warcraft. I used to just play the campaign and then I played like custom maps with AI. And I haven't been able to figure out how to get the custom map stuff to work offline. So I might just like fiddle around with it, or that might just be a problem that I'm just not aware of.
Right. Yeah.
But what about you? What have you been playing?
So, in our last episode 10, we talked about a game that I was excited about in the Buy Wait Pass segment. I said I was going to pass on or wait on it. It was called Not for Broadcast, and I actually bought it.
Oh, cool.
I played the prologue like I said I was going to after the podcast. I had a great time in the prologue, and because of the prologue, I went through and I purchased it. It was like, I think $15, $14.99. It wasn't too bad. The game's in early access, so it's not technically out yet. But so it was early access. They have 3 chapters. I've played through 2 of the chapters, and it's interesting. I think part of the piece of the game that I missed from well, it's in the demo, but like it's not evident by the store page, is that there is like a choose your own adventure game in between the chapters. So you have to go through these different questions. So it starts you off with like day one, you take over this guy's job, and then the days pass, and you kind of develop your character by answering different questions about how you feel about different laws, and they're related to your family and different things that you're doing for your family and how you're living. And the days go on, and you try to, these different questions will eventually lead you to like picking up like advertisers. So then you take the advertisers and you essentially get money into these advertisers and investments, and then you get to decide, because you're in charge of the TV's advertising, which advertisers you play. So if you invest in an advertiser, you can play their advertisements more, so then they'll draw popularity. But if you invest in an advertiser that sells toys that kill children, and you invest in their advertising to project these toys that are defective, then now you may be getting money back from your investment, but you're also pushing forward a toy that is defective and kills children. So you have that moral quandary there that you have to kind of go through. But overall, it's a pretty good game. I recommend it. It's very fast paced and kind of overwhelming at some points, because you have the broadcast TV screen, you have the live TV screen, and then you have the different feeds, and you have to change up the feeds, and you have to follow people as they talk while you're still trying, and also like beeping out people when they swear at the right time. And it's very intense, and even being instructed on what to do in the intro chapter is still you still can score poorly, and then it rates you. And I think another part of the game that I really enjoy is the rush room. So you can go back and you can listen to what the people in the studio are saying when like advertisements are playing and you can't hear, or there's like you're cut to a live segment. You can listen to the people making, and there's like drama that's going on in the studio, and you can record it. You can listen to it because the studio records everything.
Oh, cool. Yeah, I'll have to try it out. I still haven't played the free demo yet,
Prologue.
But I will. Yeah, the prologue, but I will give it a shot.
Nice. So there's that. So for this particular episode, we were going to go back to our console episodes that we've done. So we've talked about NES. We've talked about Sega Genesis. Mm-hmm. We would be rude to not talk about SNES, the Super Nintendo Entertainment System. So what memories do you have with playing the SNES?
Well, so the memories I have playing the SNES mostly come from the fact that we never owned a Super Nintendo. If you've listened to our Sega Genesis and our NES episodes, we talked about how those were the two consoles that we pretty much had for the longest time. Eventually, we got an N64 and then a GameCube a while way later. But primarily growing up, we had the Super Nintendo, or the original Nintendo, and the Sega Genesis.
Right.
So the only time I've played Super Nintendo is at people's houses, and we had a family friend of ours, my godmother, who had a Super Nintendo that I would play the Super Star Wars games on, specifically Super Return of the Jedi. And then our aunt also had a Super Nintendo, which is where I think I played Mario RPG and a couple other games for the first time. And
I think Super Mario World, which is...
Super Mario World.
I think that's pretty much like a staple SNES game right there.
Yeah, for sure.
Well, I think any Mario game is going to be a staple flagship game of whatever the Nintendo console is at the time.
Yeah. What about you, Seth?
So I have memories as well as going to the different family members' houses, extended family that had the SNES as well. I remember specifically at our aunt's playing the Tiny Toon Adventures game, the Tiny Toon Adventures Buster Busts Loose.
Yeah.
And I also remember playing the Super Star Wars games, and it was fun. I think we also played some Kirby Superstar too.
I couldn't remember who owned Kirby Superstar, if it was our aunt or the family friend, but I do remember playing Kirby Superstar like on the actual system.
Right. I also really got to fall in love with like tactical RPGs and RPGs by watching a friend of the family. I don't know if he actually listens to the podcast, but a guy by the name of Dan. I think I've mentioned him in the past. He had Final Fantasy 3-6 on the SNES. So Final Fantasy, if the Final Fantasy series has a different numbering based on where it's released. So in America, the Final Fantasy on the SNES was, well, there was a few, but there was Final Fantasy 3 that I watched. In Japan, it was Final Fantasy 6. So people go back and forth about what to call it. So I call it 3-6, and that I watched that game be played, and that game actually was one of the games that really got me into like RPG games and stuff like that. Just watching Dan play it.
Yeah, I think the thing that from what I remember playing early Super Nintendo games, and going back and playing Super Nintendo games now, is that the major difference I always noticed between the Super Nintendo and the Sega were two things, and that was the sound quality was always way better. Super Nintendo games had more of like, the music just sounded more almost like orchestrated, like clear, where Sega Genesis relied a lot on like a lot of heavy synth noises and stuff like that. And the graphical difference was something that I used to notice. While the Sega Genesis games looked nice, the Super Nintendo always had a lot of like parallax scrolling going on, and it utilized something called the Super FX chip on some of the cartridges to kind of give a almost fake 3D look to certain graphical elements. So if you've ever played a game like, actually Final Fantasy does it really well in the opening, where the map I think rotates, so it goes from being like a top-down perspective to being like a sideways perspective. Kind of.
And I think anytime you travel as well, or if you take, there's a point in time in the game where you get an airship.
Yes,
you fly the airship. It's done, I believe, in the same uses the Super FX chip.
Yeah, exactly. And of course, Star Fox was the game that kind of heavily relied on the Super FX chip. The whole game was made using almost like 3D looking graphics, which was very, very unique for the time. I feel like we had a family friend that had a copy of that game.
Of the original Star Fox?
Of the original Star Fox.
Star Fox for the SNES? Was it the original?
Yeah, I feel like I remember playing it at someone's house and just being very impressed by it, because it was a 3D game on a console, which was really unprecedented to me growing up with Sega. We didn't have 3D games like Star Fox.
Yeah, no, definitely. I think that that Star Fox on the SNES was a pretty staple, like a really showing off the use of the Super FX chip, as it were. To be able to kind of show you the capabilities of the machine and how different it was from the NES. I always also felt that the SNES was I felt like it was brighter. It might have been because on the Super Nintendo that we would go and see, we would be playing games like Tiny Toons, which is going to be brighter naturally, versus like Vector Man on the Sega Genesis.
Yeah.
So but I always felt like, personally, when I think of like SNES games, like off the rip, I just think of like Zelda game, the Link to the Past, and the Tiny Toon Adventure games. Both of those are very bright, colorful games.
Yeah.
And they really show off the palette. Versus like Sonic the Hedgehog, he's blue. It's kind of bright, but it's just like, it's also very fast. So it's like,
and I think that was something that Nintendo they kind of wanted to be known to be for the most part, a family system.
Right.
So they like to use bright colors a lot. You look at Super Mario World, or for example Yoshi's Island, which came out a little later, and it uses a lot of like pastels. And bright colors. Whereas with like a game like Sonic, where Green Hill Zone is a very bright and colorful level. The levels start to kind of get a little darker as you go through them. Starlight Zone and Spring Yard Zone are kind of more industrial looking, have darker colors to them, as opposed to kind of bright in your face colors.
Did you want to get into the games specifically and talk about them more in depth?
Yeah, I mean, taking a look at a game like we could start off with just talking about the Super Star Wars games. Those are the ones that I think we both have strong memories of. So Going back to also when we talked about Star Wars games, the Super Star Wars games came out pretty much all of them came out in the 90s.
Yep, we had the original Super Star Wars come out, and it came out in 1992 in North America. The Empire Strikes Back came out in 1993. And the Super Star Wars Return of the Jedi came out in 1994.
And the one I have the most memories playing is the Return of the Jedi one.
Yes, yep.
Which I think I think that was the one that our family friend had. I think that was the only one they had.
Yes, I believe so too. I don't believe they had the other ones. And wait, they might have had the Empire Strikes Back one though.
The thing I remember most about Super Return of the Jedi was just how hard it was, especially the opening scene. So in the opening scene of the game, it's not even a scene from the movie. You're flying on a land speeder on this like narrow dirt path, and you have to jump over these blocks and these pits in this kind of quasi 3D sequence. And it is like it's just you keep falling off the path or you get hit and
it's
die. And
like Rainbow Road.
Yeah, it's like Rainbow Road, but it's the
but in
Tatooine. It's the very first level. It's like there's no setup to this. It like does the Star Wars, the title crawl, and then is this scene, which it's not even in the movie. and then you play as I think you start out as Luke and you wander around.
You start off as Leia playing as
Bosch.
Leia.
That's right.
You're
as
Bosch,
yeah.
And you becomes a platformer where you're like you get superpowers as Leia, so she can blast things with her stick. She can jump around. She can spin attack moves. She's fighting all sorts of creatures on Tatooine. They're bug-like creatures, and there's all sorts of things leading into Jabba's palace. And the boss of the first mission, as it were, is just the little globe that comes out of the
that little thing that like pops out to talk to C-3PO.
Yeah, so if you have watched Return of the Jedi, which I hope you have, but if you haven't, it's just like a small globe. And it's not anything like big in the movie. It's not like an important character or anything more than like a transition scene, but in the game it is the first boss.
Yeah,
it is gigantic.
The thing appears for less than like 30 seconds in the movie and is a substantial boss in the game that is very difficult. I mean, that's the thing I remember most about the games, is that, or at least Return of the Jedi, was that it was just hard as hell to play.
Yeah. And you didn't get to pick your character until after you beat that oh no, you did get to pick your character.
Well, you would get to, if you died, I think it would take you to a character select screen.
There was a character select screen right before you did the platformer, so you could also go through that beginning part as Luke or Chewbacca.
Yeah, you couldn't play as Han until later after you save him. Then he becomes unlockable. But yeah, you could play as Luke or Chewbacca. With Luke, his powers make a little bit more sense in the sense that he's a Jedi. I do think it was cool that you got to do your lightsaber throw that they use in like some of the other later like 3D Star Wars games. They have a similar lightsaber throw where you can kind of guide the lightsaber around as it spins around and knocks enemies down. Every now and then, though, you would encounter this, like, it was like one power-up, and it was kind of like Sonic's speed shoes in Sonic, where your character would just, like, accelerate at hyperspeed, which, saying it sounds like a really useful tool, but these levels weren't, like, intuitive, so you would be trying to platform on these small platforms above a, like, death drop, and you would touch this thing that would speed you up, and now you'd have to, like, try to like jump through all these platforms while going like hyperspeed. So it was almost more of like a challenge that it would create as opposed to a power up.
What I liked is that there's the Empire Strikes Back one. Starts off in Hoth. Yeah. And it's like you got this opening crawl, you got this like setup for like a Star Wars game, and then you get on a Tauntaun and like Luke's like riding around on this Tauntaun, shooting his blaster everywhere, and it almost looks like the Tauntaun's like spewing stuff out of his mouth, and the Tauntaun is like a large, just like a large mount creature that they ride in Star Wars. on cold planets, but it just has vibes of like almost like a Star Wars Mario World where he's like riding a Tauntaun instead of Yoshi.
Yeah, exactly. Which I mean, going from Star Wars into Mario, like if we could have one segue, that's the segue.
I know, right? I was good.
Yeah, that was good. Speaking of Mario World is of course a classic kind of staple of the Super Nintendo. I think it's one of those games that's been ported over to pretty much everything that Nintendo has ever created. It's on the Switch, absolutely. It's on the 3DS, it's on the Wii U, it's on the Wii, and it's also in their Super NES Classic kind of mini console that they released.
Yeah.
And the thing I remember about, so going from playing the original Mario Brothers. Oh, I'm sorry. What was it?
I just think I think I might actually go and download Super Mario World after this.
Yes. Do it. So going from playing the original Mario Brothers on the NES, which I played before, if I remember correctly, I played that before playing Super Mario World. It's such a contrast. Where in Super Mario World, it's just so much more colorful and fun looking. Like everything is just so happy. The Mario himself is just like, he's always just walking around like he's in a good mood. And you got to ride Yoshi, which I think was really cool. Kind of added a new dynamic to the game where you could, Mario like taps Yoshi's head and he sticks out his tongue and you can swallow enemies. And if you swallow enough of them, you'll get a power up. And the levels were a bit more grander than the original games on the NES. There was like a lot of secrets that you could unlock. In the Ghost, there was these ghost houses that you could go to, and they had multiple exits, and if you exited a certain way, it would unlock an entirely new path on the map, so you could get into different special worlds. And you could only, if you did this, you would be able to unlock stuff that would give you either a faster way to get through that world that you're on, or that part of the map you're on, or it would help you get to what's called the Star Road, which was this like challenge world that you could get to in the end.
Right. I'm actually, so I feel like Super Mario World is a great follow-up to the Super Mario Brothers 3. So,
yeah,
because I feel like they expanded on the kind of choose your own world that you want to play in kind of concept, where in Super Mario Brothers 3, they gave you multiple kind of paths that you can go in, and Super Mario World just like expanded that tenfold. Like you can go, you can go pick up your Yoshis. There's different color Yoshis. You can play as Luigi. You can the game. It was I don't know if we mentioned it came out in 1990. It's often credited as one of the greatest video games of all times, and sold over 20 million copies worldwide, which means that it was the best-selling SNES game. And there's a reason why we have a animated television series of the same name, and they also released a prequel called Yoshi's Island in 1995. And like Zachary said, it's been released all throughout the world, all throughout the consoles. It was actually, I think this is actually the version that we played in the 1994 compilation. There was a Super Mario All-Stars and Super Mario World combo. And I definitely remember the Super Mario All-Stars game, which included, it was just a remake of the 4 Super Mario Brothers titles. So you could play.
Super Mario All-Stars came out in 93. And it was like Seth said, it was pretty much just a compilation of Super Mario Brothers 1, Super Mario Brothers 2, Super Mario Brothers 3, and then Japan's Super Mario Brothers 2, which we called the Lost Levels on this compilation. And all of the levels were, or all the games were redesigned to have a more 16-bit aesthetic to them. And there were some tweaks in terms of the, like, what you would call like the physics and stuff like that, just to make them a bit more, a bit less glitchy where there was glitches back in the original systems and such.
It was definitely a really I liked it a lot. It made I think it was also one of the first Mario games that you could go backwards,
Yeah,
where
yeah.
you could actually in all the other previous Mario incarnations, once you went past a certain point, you couldn't go back. And Super Mario World, allowed you to go back. So if you missed something, you could go backwards to do something, or maybe you had to go backwards to solve a puzzle. Except in certain missions, I don't think you were allowed to do it. But in some of the missions, you were allowed to kind of freely go about. You were still timed, so like you weren't allowed to just stay out there forever. But it was definitely I felt like a unique. That was something that I remember as well, being able
It
to go
also gave
back.
us and it gave us probably the best power up in the entire Mario, in every any Mario game, which is the cape power,
Oh
which was
yes,
a upgraded version of the tail from Super Mario Brothers 3, which allowed you to fly. The cape was similar in the sense it allowed you to fly, but you could also do this thing where you could kind of like swoop up and down with it. You could gain if you gained height, then you could drop at a fast speed and then catch your speed, and use that to get even higher than you did before. So it was kind of cool to play around with that, and that kind of changed up the dynamic of pretty much all the levels once you unlocked that ability.
right. And then Final Fantasy. There was Final Fantasy 2, which is Final Fantasy 4 in Japan, and Final Fantasy 3, which is Final Fantasy 6 in Japan. So I played both of them. I I believe I beat both of them, or at least definitely, yeah. Final Fantasy 3 6. I talk about that one because I personally like that one more. It was ranked the second best RPG of all times back in 2017 by ING, so it doesn't really matter, but it was. Um, that game came out in 1994, and you played as like this group of people, as you do in most Final Fantasy games, and you could. There was essentially 14 permanent playable characters, and you played as this girl who the starting character, the main character, is a half human, half Esper, which is a magical race, I guess, in Final Fantasy. And she's enslaved to this evil empire, and she has to do what this empire has to forces her to do. And she runs around in this like mech armor, and eventually she runs into a character by the name of Locke, who is a treasure hunter. The starting character's name is Terra, and she runs into a character named Locke, and he is a treasure hunter and a rebel sympathizer, and he likes to protect people, so he protects Terra. And him and Terra, essentially, Terra ends up being very much not in the mindset throughout part of the game because she's kind of trying to free herself from the Empire shackles. And so she and him kind of wander through trying to escape the Empire, and then eventually recruit people and become like a rebellion, and then they go up against the Empire and so on and so forth. But that it's a great Final Fantasy game. I actually recommend it, even if you don't like Final Fantasy games. I recommend Final Fantasy 3-6. It's just like the story is really, really enjoyable, and I liked it a lot.
Yeah, and what's nice about the Final Fantasy games is, despite there being a number in the title, you don't have to have played the first ones,
Right.
in order to go into this one. I mean, you could if you want to kind of get some experience with at least the type of game, but it's definitely not a requirement. You can jump
Yeah.
right into Final Fantasy 3 without any time playing Final Fantasy 1 or 2.
One, and two. Two is the other game that was on the SNES that I played, where it's also known as 4. And this one, you're playing as another large cast. Most Final Fantasies have multiple characters that you can play as. And you play as there's 12 playable characters in this one, and the main character is this guy by the name of Cecil, who's a Dark Knight, and he ends up essentially he joins up a bunch of people and he has to save the world from ending. And so it's like it's him, and he hangs out with a dragoon and a white mage, and there's an engineer. And the people who like Final Fantasy, who listen to our podcast, are like yelling at me right now. But it's essentially they have to save the world, and they do that. So I obviously, based on my description of both these games, remember more fondly 3.6 versus 2.4. But I enjoyed 2.4 while I was playing it, for sure.
Yeah, and the company that made Final Fantasy, Square, they definitely weren't unfamiliar with working on the Super Nintendo. They created a bunch of games for it, including Chrono Trigger, Secret of Mana. I believe one of the games in the Romancing Saga came out in there. And they also worked with Shigeru Miyamoto, the creator of Mario, on Super Mario RPG, which was a role-playing game set in the Mario universe, which I played definitely more than I played Final Fantasy, but it definitely a great RPG game. The cool thing, Super Mario RPG is your generic story about Mario. Mario is going to visit the princess. Bowser has kidnapped the princess. Mario fights Bowser, and then the princess is further kidnapped. Although this time by like a giant evil sword. And Mario has to go through the Mushroom Kingdom, kind of recruiting different people to kind of team up and help fight Bowser's enemies, Bowser's kind of minions. And the cool thing about it is, being an RPG, it uses kind of the turn-based strategy element that Final Fantasy made use of. But the one of the differences is that it made use of these kind of action commands, so that when you, for example, went to go attack an enemy, if you timed a button combo right, you could do like double damage onto that enemy, which was a cool thing to experience in the game. You know, it kind of rewards you for essentially for button mashing if you're quick enough. But you know, it's overall a fun RPG game. It's kind of, I would consider, more of like a beginner's RPG if you're a bit daunted by kind of the bigger RPGs like Final Fantasy. You might want to give Super Mario RPG a shot, just to kind of get familiar with the type of gameplay.
Right. Yeah, it's I've had far more experience personally with the Final Fantasy RPGs versus Super Mario RPG. I get Super Mario RPG was kind of a precursor to Paper Mario, wasn't it? Isn't Paper Mario RPG kind of, that was, I think, was that on the N64 or was that also on the SNES?
That was on the N64, Paper Mario, and I think Paper Mario was actually initially billed as Super Mario RPG 2, and then they just changed the title to Paper Mario.
Nice. I remember Paper Mario. I enjoyed it.
Yeah, and Paper Mario carries over a lot of the same gameplay mechanics, such as the kind of timing your attacks to do more damage. And then there's of course another popular RPG game. I haven't played a ton of it. I played through mostly more recently, but it's Earthbound, known as Mother 2 in Japan. It's part of the Mother trilogy over there. And Earthbound is kind of a cool RPG game because it's more of a subversion of the RPG genre, and unfortunately did really terrible here in terms of sales, mostly due to some really bad marketing that they used. They tried to do like a gross out campaign through the Nintendo Power magazine by having like a scratch and sniff thing on the pages with the Earthbound ads. And it was also more of an expensive game because it came in an oversized box with an entire walkthrough manual inside of it. So it was pricier, and it just wasn't advertised well.
I was gonna say, I think a lot of Earthbound, like NES, got a lot of notoriety from Super Smash Brothers when he was included in that for the N64.
Yeah, definitely. And the kind of the difference between a game like Earthbound and a game like Final Fantasy or Super Mario RPG is that it's not set in really a fantasy setting. It's actually set in a small town that is stylized as kind of a Americana or Western town. Not Western like Old West, but like a kind of American, like Americanized town. The music is not like orchestrated or anything. It's all like use of like reggae and like salsa and dub music, and there's like ska in it and stuff like that. It's very much pop culture ingrained, but it does some cool things with the actual gameplays, where if you get to a certain level in your character gets to a certain level and you do a random encounter, you don't actually have to fight an enemy if it's a lower level than you. So in most RPG games, when you're going around, you'll do these random encounters where the enemies will kind of pop up out of nowhere, and you'll have to fight them no matter what. And when you get overpowered in a game, this kind of becomes tedious, and it's usually one of the major criticisms of RPG games is what's called grinding, where you're fighting all these low level enemies all the time and you're just beating them in one hit go. So Earthbound does something cool where if it's determined by the game that you have a higher probability of beating the enemy that you're encountering, you will automatically win and you'll gain the experience points. So it pretty much cuts down a lot of grinding when you get later in the game, so that you're still gaining experience points, but you don't have to sit and play through every single low level battle over and over again. Which I think is a cool little feature that kind of changes kind of the dynamic of how you play through the game.
And I think we would not be able to talk about the SNES without talking about Legend of Zelda: A Link to the Past. And so Legend of Zelda: A Link to the Past is one of the the Zelda game that comes out on the SNES. Was released in 1991. Where they moved away from the side-scrolling perspective that they introduced in Zelda 2, The Adventures of Link.
Because that did so well.
And they went back to top-down.
Yeah.
So if I played this game, if I had just got the SNES, I would have been happy with this Legend of Zelda purchase. So the Link to the Past is a Zelda game, top-down. You get a little more abilities, because it's a newer game. So you have arrows, there's bombs that are they're back, but they're now separate items. You, instead of using a rupee to fire an arrow, you get arrows. You are able to be a little more flexible, where you can walk diagonally and you're able to run. Your sword can now swing sideways instead of merely stabbing forward, so you can have a broad range of combat. There's also A Link to the Past allows into the Dark World, which is the first time that there's two parallel worlds where you can travel between. The first being the Light World, which is ordinary Hyrule. The Dark World was created when Ganon corrupted the Sacred World. So this theme of the two different parallel worlds comes into play in later Zelda games, and it's first introduced in this SNES game. So it's not in the previous two games.
Yeah, and the use of the two parallel worlds is really cool for puzzle solving in the game. Sometimes there's areas in the ordinary Hyrule and the Light World, as it is, that you can't get past, so you need to travel to the Dark World in order to get past, and then travel back into the Light World so that you can progress. So it's kind of cool the way it does that. The Dark World is significantly harder in places than the Light World, but by the time you end up there, you're have substantial more abilities than when you start out, obviously. But yeah, like what Seth was saying, it introduces a whole range of new abilities, such as the way you just fight. You can actually do a spin with your sword, which was kind of new. And there's also a hook shot kind of item that you can unlock, which allows you to pull items closer to you or to get across gaps, which is later brought back in the 3D games.
And the boomerang and stuff.
In the boomerang, which helps you out and it pulls stuff towards you, or it will stun enemies very briefly.
So there is actually an Easter egg in the Legend of Zelda: A Link to the Past, and it's called the Chris Houlihan Room. So there was a Nintendo Power, which was a magazine publishing house back in the day. I think it's still maybe around.
No, they
not.
actually
Went defunct.
Yeah, their last issue, which was issue 285, was released in December of 2012.
So they had a contest where they would select a winner at random to appear in an upcoming Nintendo game, but didn't say what game it would be. It was A Link to the Past. The winner got a single room in A Link to the Past, which contained 45 blue rupees and a note that bared a greeting from Chris, who was the winner. And the note said, "My name is Chris Houlihan. This is my top secret room. Keep it between us, okay?" The room was found. There's a number of different methods that you can get to the room. One of the methods was a crash prevention measure. So the game would send the Link to this room if it could not determine where Link was going when he goes to another area. So if for some reason your game bugged out when you left to go to another zone and it didn't know where you were going, you would end up in this room, and you would have 45 blue rupees and a note from Chris Houlihan. So that is interesting. I also think that that's kind of interesting because that kind of almost plays back to Ready Player One.
Oh yeah,
where he kind of builds in the Easter eggs into like a secret room where they have to locate within the code of the game and stuff like that. And I think that kind of like when I hear about a game like Chris Houlihan's room, I kind of just think about the book and movie Ready Player One, which is it's a fun novel as well.
Yeah, it definitely has a lot of references and stuff like that to things like that.
So with that, I think that's gonna put a fork in SNES, as it were. So we'll move on to our buy, wait, pass. Zach, do you want to tell me what you're excited about buying, waiting, or passing on?
Yeah, so my buy, wait, pass for this episode is Marvel's Avengers, which is actually by Square Enix. Yes, it's by Square Enix, which is the company that worked on the Final Fantasy games. So Marvel's Avengers is coming out in September of this year, 2020, and it is a action adventure game where you play as the Avengers characters, famous for the comics and the movies. It is not based on any particular comic storyline, and it's not set in the Marvel Cinematic Universe, the MCU, as it were. It's entirely its own universe. It's its own kind of versions of the characters that we know from the Marvel Universe of Captain America, Iron Man, Hulk, etc., etc. There's some cool things about it from what I've seen from the gameplay trailers, but right now I think I'm currently at a pass. Not really for any sense of the game looking not like great or anything to me. It looks very cool, and I'm happy that there's, it's going to be a game available for people who love the Marvel universe. I just don't see myself buying the game, or at least getting it until it's maybe heavily discounted. I did really enjoy one of the last Marvel games that came out, Marvel Spider-Man, which was on the PS4. But I think that was a little different, where it was a focus on one character. It kind of gave you one mode of gameplay, and I think that allowed the game to kind of be its own thing. Where this kind of has playing as a whole bunch of different characters and stuff, which I definitely think could work, but it's just not something that I'm looking forward to or really that interested in at the moment. So I think this is probably going to be a pass for me.
Is this the one that you sent the meme about to me, where there was the Marvel Avengers looking like they were like actors, or there were
one of the biggest, at least early criticisms of the game, at least from commercials and stuff, or from the early commercials that were at E3, is that the characters all look very well designed, but they kind of look like knockoff versions of their Marvel Cinematic Universe versions. So the Captain America they have kind of looks like the
Kind of looks like Chris Evans.
Kind of looks like Chris Evans, but it kind of looks like Chris Evans if you just didn't know what Chris Evans looked like. And like the Black Widow they have kind of looks like Scarlett Johansson, but just not quite. And the Hulk, kind of looks like Ruffalo, but it's just not quite there.
Right.
So that's one of the things. That's definitely not that's not like a deciding factor in why I want to buy the game or not. I mean, Marvel's Spider-Man, the Spider-Man they had didn't look nothing like Tom Holland, but that is something that I found kind of funny, is that these characters, I think there's a couple of memes going around where it's like, when you can't afford the real deal.
The real Avengers, you get these guys. It's just kind of like us, right? If you can't afford a real podcast, you can listen to us.
You can just listen to us.
There's the game that I'm looking forward to. I'm not even going to wait for you to ask, but is Emily Away 3.
Okay.
The tagline for Emily Away 3 is it's 2008 and AIM, being AOL Instant Messenger, is dead. So the Emily Away series is done by a guy by the name of Kyle Sweely. He, I think, is pretty much a one-man operation and develops and publishes the games himself. The first game, Emily Away, is free. I think it's always going to be free. And you play based circa like early 2000s. You play and you AOL instant message chat people. So if you're looking for an experience of AOL instant messaging people, Emily Away is your deal. Emily Away 2 brings the game a little forward in the future, so it's like circa 2004, 2005, and the game has an additional story. And the game is a adventure game. It's a little psychological thriller, I'd say.
Yeah.
It definitely screws with you, and you end up getting like you type back and forth between these conversations, and you get to pick what you want to type about, but you have to like hit keys in order to type. So you're not necessarily typing what you're saying, but in order to type faster, you have to type faster on the keyboard, and you have to pick things quick, and it speeds it up so that you can't really sometimes read what you're saying, and sometimes you screw up your relationship with the people that you're interacting with. Emily Away 3 takes place in the Facebook world, and it's when Facebook just starts, and there is people trying to, essentially your character graduates from senior of high school and is moving on to college and gets a Facebook and starts chatting with people on Facebook, and you're trying to branch a relationship with people on, it's called Face Nook, and you're operating out of Facebook. I'm going to put this on a buy. I really appreciate the Emily Away series. I don't think it's going to be more than $15, and I think I'll buy it when it comes out. It'll probably also come out with a discount in the beginning as well, so probably launch with like 10% off. It is coming out soonish is the release date. It is in Steam. It says soonish, so they'll send me an email when it comes out. If it looks like something you would want to play, put it on your wish list, and Steam will send you an email when it comes out. So that's what we have. So before we wrap everything up, there's a couple of ways of contacting us, supporting us, and listening to us. That's what you do with this podcast, is listen.
Yes.
Zach, if I wanted to contact us, how would I do that?
Well, you can contact us through a couple of different methods, but one is through our email, which is ClassicGamingBrothers@gmail.com. That will go direct into our inbox. There's also a contact form on our brand new website, which we announced in the last episode. It's ClassicGamingBrothers.com, and there should be a tab that you'll see that says Contact Us. That will bring you to a web form. Just fill in the information in the web form, and that will just send direct to our inbox as well. So it's essentially doing the same as emailing, but it's not through an email client. So yeah, I guess it's a little lazier. So those are the two ways to contact us directly. You can also indirectly contact us through our Facebook page, Classic Gaming Brothers, or through our Twitter, CG Brothers Pod. And if you follow us on either that or Facebook, you'll also get updates whenever we release a new episode or have any other announcements to make.
Which, spoiler alert, usually is on Sunday.
Yes, usually we release an episode on Sunday, and we'll probably have a couple announcements going forward, such as any conventions that Seth or myself will be at, or ways you can, if we're going to be in the area, you can reach out to us.
Right. We also have an Instagram. It's called @Classic Gaming Brothers. And you can follow us on Instagram. We post occasionally on there. I think we post more on Facebook. We usually do, if we do have a visual medium, such as like our stickers that we have, we'll post any visual medium on Instagram and cross-post to Facebook. So you can follow us there. And then that's contacting us, supporting us. You can like, follow, subscribe, share, do all the ringing of the bells. We were requested by our listeners to sell merchandise with our logo on it.
Not sure why, but we were.
Not sure why, but we were requested by our listeners to have merchandise with our stuff on it. So if you want merchandise with our stuff on, or with our logo on it, you can go to our website. You can go to the shop and you can buy a t-shirt, possibly more by the time this podcast releases, but there is at least a t-shirt that you can buy. It's good. It's a Glidden. I'm wearing one right now. It's cotton. If you want to buy it, you could buy it. We have a print-on-demand service that we work with, and they will drop ship you a t-shirt. That's a way of supporting us. You can also listen, like, and subscribe, which is what we prefer. And also to listen to us. Yeah, on a podcast service. Any of them. We try to be on them. So if we're not on it, let us know. But we're on most of them. I don't think there's one. We're on things that I don't even know that we're on.
Yeah, every now and then I'll be like, oh, I wonder if we're on this platform. And yeah, sure enough, we're on that platform.
Yeah. So I see the stats come through. There's some weird stuff that people listen to us on it. And I'm just like, What is going on over here? It's like Safari VR. I don't even know. I should have prepared better. But.
Well,
you're going to do it. I'm sorry.
I guess I'll do it. But,
yeah, you can do it. You can do it. Go.
As always, don't play games like my brother.
And don't play games like my brother.
I've been Zach.
And I've been Seth.
And we've been the Classic Gaming Brothers.
Yes, we have. And I get to do it next time. That's right.
Yeah, that's right.
So
should
bad.
I just roll the music? I think I should just roll
the music. Well, you decide on it because it's you're the person that puts the music into where it needs to go.
I'm just gonna. It's all